I am resident of Collinwood, Jules Sains for YouTube, and this is Patrick McCray, my buddy. We're here to discuss Dark Shadows in Collinwood. So, Patrick, buddy,
Yes.
I have a theory here.
Okay.
I think Collinwood, the house, is alive. I think it has a soul.
Okay. Well, okay. So this is a discussion that we started a little earlier,
Yes,
and
yes.
and I thought it was interesting enough. I said, let's do this, and um, now, do you want to? Okay, give me your reasons. Give me your reasons.
Well, I mean, here's a house. Let's start way back, 1966. We're told this house is haunted, and it is. That's proven from a fictional sense. We're told that ghosts move through it, and that's true. We also learn that the house has parallel time. We also know that the
Yes.
house has a staircase that leads through time that's built by one of the ancestors.
Okay.
So if you have these ghosts appearing,
Uh-huh.
these parallel time rooms appearing, and this staircase that appears,
Okay.
who's to say that this house doesn't have a soul and isn't alive itself?
Okay. Now, how rigorous do you want me to be with the is this going to be a ultra keen super neato groovy cool discussion, which I'm down with, or do we actually want to talk about how you figure out whether a bit of conjecture about something in pop media that we love has weight to it, weight beyond? Okay, sure. If okay, to be angel's advocate,
Yes.
first, it's a cool idea. Is neat. Is one more character, and it makes us wonder. And to me, the single biggest smoking gun literally belongs to Lamar Trask.
Yes.
Where Barnabas, I think, so much as says, I think maybe the house exact advent. No, that was me who said that. But the idea is the house sort of helped him commit the perfect crime, he says. So that really is a very interesting exhibit A. Um, and you could even say that it revealing the time staircase,
Yeah.
and things like that for Julia in its greatest time of need is suggestive of something that a living thing might do.
Yeah.
So those would be two of my biggest pieces of evidence, and it leads to a cooler Dark Shadows. It leads to a Dark Shadows where we can go, wow, man, I want, and then we start to run into there's something I stub my toe on, and it's when I then want to say, wow, and imagine what else they could have done with it, because it's such a good idea.
Yeah.
I want more.
Yeah.
I want more, and that's the challenge, and this is the downer of sort of rigorous examination of these things, is that it often kind of takes some of the air out of the balloon, which is why nobody likes it, particularly except for academics. But now let me then flip that around and ask you something.
Yes.
And when you have a theory about something like this,
Right.
and you do put it through its paces, and you do put it through its paces, and you find, yeah, how does that feel?
It feels good.
It does feel good.
But in the same, here's my thing.
Okay.
I'm not just doing it to feel good. I'm looking at this going, okay, from a fictional sense, and as a fan, we're
Yeah.
both fans of DS. you've been told something as a fan. You're going into Collinsport, you're meeting Maggie Evans, you've been told the house is haunted. Okay, you
Yeah.
don't have to believe it, but then you find out that's true. The house is haunted. It's like, okay. Then on top of that, the house isn't just about moving rooms. It's about these things come into the house. A phoenix comes into the house. A vampire comes into the house. And then a witch comes into the house. No problem. Warlocks come through the house. Then the house has different rooms where you have a parallel time room, two parallel time rooms, a staircase that goes through time. And it's like, wait a second. Then another parallel. When you have the second parallel time room, it aids in allowing the Martress to disappear. It's like, is this house alive? And it makes you question it and go, it probably is. This house probably has a soul.
Okay, so there are two interesting questions then. Is being alive,
yes,
for you, does it mean the same thing as having a soul? Because it's a good question.
Yes.
Because you made two statements there.
Yes, I did. If the house is alive,
and you're not being grilled. I just want to find out, like, what you mean.
What I mean is the house alive? Yes. Does it live and breathe and have a soul the way a person does? But it doesn't. The house doesn't literally get up and move, Mike.
No. We don't think it does. I mean, there are a lot of people we've both seen at conventions who are alive, but they don't get up and move.
What I'm meaning is this house is its own life force. It has a soul, a life. It lives and breathes. And whatever happens in its walls, it controls most of all.
Okay.
And that's what I'm meaning.
So it is aware?
Yes.
It has intention?
Yes.
And it can, to various extents, take action based on those intentions?
Yes.
Okay. That's good. So what we're doing here is we're defining our terms. We're defining what alive means. So then when we ask, is Collinwood alive? We know what we're talking about. So then you have to have evidence for those things. Because here's the other way that we look at the question. Is there any other possible bullshit supernatural explanation that we could apply to the phenomenon that you listed as an explanation for why all this stuff is happening?
Right.
So I put that to you. Is there any other explanation?
The only other explanation to me, and this is, you've talked about Judah Zachary. I do think Zachary has the power to pull a lot of this off. Now, because there are things, to be fair, that happen outside the house.
Yeah.
But but that doesn't explain everything that happened inside the house. It explains some things.
Sure.
But not everything. And
okay, keep going, because then I have another question for you.
Okay. And when you get into when you look at the outside stuff, and by outside, I mean, look, Laura just showing up from Phoenix, that's outside the house, right?
Sure.
Jason McGuire coming back to Collinwood, that's outside the house. He comes from the outside world. When you have events that happen outside the house, that's outside the house. That only explains so many things. When you have a Judah Zachary, as far as we know, wasn't born inside Collinwood. Now, unless things change, you know what I mean. But he's a character who's not born in the Collinwood, but he has I assume that Judah was born with his powers, the way Count Patofe was. I do believe there are creatures who are born with their abilities, sort of like X-Men a lot.
Okay.
And here you could explain certain things that Zachary could do that does affect the house, but not everything he does explains that. It's like it only explains certain much. When I look at the house itself, did the house is the house for or against its owners? And I think that's the big question I would have.
That's a wonderful question.
I would have, and I can't even answer it, and I apologize for it.
Sure. So I think we've done a good job at not everything is related necessarily to the house being alive. And then the other question is there a strong need in the story for there to be kind of an overarching intention to the house itself?
I think for the house itself, no, the house just does what it wants when it wants. From an inside controlled standpoint.
Okay. Now, when we talk about the house and being alive, that means it has a personality.
Yes.
It has, okay. Does that extend to the old house? Or is the old house dead and Collinwood alive? Or are both the old house and Collinwood alive separately? And if they are, do they battle or do they get along?
I think each house has its own persona, its own soul, if you will.
So these are two separate personalities.
Right.
That's really interesting.
Now, the old house is the sort of the old representation of the Collins from Europe, but it has its own representation of its own soul. It doesn't necessarily mean it resembles Joshua.
You get something interesting because we're told about that the old house, or as I like to call it, Collins Hall.
Right.
That Collins Hall is essentially a transplanted. I believe it's transplanted. It has chunks that were transplanted from Europe. Yeah. From England, I guess, and so if they are two personalities, think about this. Collins Hall is the European personality.
Right.
And Collinwood is the American personality. Mm-hmm. And those are two very different identities. And so then if you follow that, what do we associate with those two personalities? And how do they show up in the show? Mm-hmm. So what does a European sensibilityed living house, how does that manifest itself differently than how Collinwood, the brash American house? Because let's look at the old house. What are the wacky, potentially sentient things the old house does?
Though the old house doesn't necessarily shift through time, but what the old house does is it descends into the ocean. It was built out for the sea and for defense, so it has a connection to the very sea.
Wow. Okay. Which means when anything is connected to water, that means a connection to life and to birth.
Yes.
And so that's interesting. So now you not only have European and American, you have the primal force of water, yep, and the primal force of earth.
Yes.
As these two opposing factors. Cool. So what I see with the old house, in terms of wacky phenomenon, is that it largely specializes in, and again, with birth, it kind of is the more powerful foci for ghosts. Yeah. That you get a ghost here and there in Collinwood, you get the widows in Collinwood, but nowhere do we see them en masse like we do when they come after Matthew Morgan's sorry ass.
Yeah.
That really is, to me, the old house's greatest display of don't with me.
Right.
Now, Collinwood, like America, is this crazy mishmash of way too much power. I mean, it's like 3 or 4 muscle cars of the supernatural all going in different directions at once, and what's in the center? The parallel time room that's, trying to keep it all spinning. The parallel time room is almost like a gyroscope in the middle of this insane machine, because you got time travel. You got parallel time. You do have some ghosts.
Right.
But yeah, you got time travel and parallel time and a lot of stuff involving time. And think about this. When we first meet Collinwood, it is this guardian of memory. It's this guardian of past. It is Liz's time capsule.
Yeah.
So it's the old house is about who, and Collinwood's about when.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
dark. There it is.
Yeah. Really, really good stuff. Holy shit. I mean, I do think it's a possibility, for sure. For it's something Dark Shadows could play with maybe one day. I don't know if they ever will, if it ever will.
Now, may I play devil's advocate?
Go ahead, sir.
Okay. So we've covered a lot of it. We've covered, first of all, we have to ask, what does it mean to be alive?
Right.
And the definition of alive has to be so distinct, it can't be mistaken for anything else. Right. So when we use this word alive, there it is. 2, we can't really be intellectually honest as long as we do 2 naughty things. And they are naughty because they lead often to wrong conclusions in real life. It's like in police work. Something would be thrown out if we had two different ways of thinking. One, if we started with a conclusion, the house is alive, and then went back and looked for evidence to back it up. We have to be looking at the show objectively, come across phenomena, and when we put it all together, it has to be so specific to this condition of living that then we go, well, the explanation for all of this patterned phenomena could be that it's alive.
Right.
That was who was it? I think it's Patricia Cornwall. She's the mystery writer. Then she writes this Case Scarpetta books about this forensic, doctor. She wrote a book, I believe, about Jack the Ripper.
Mm-hmm.
And it was supposedly a nonfiction book. And the infuriating thing about it, and the reason why I understand that it is my understanding that a lot of ripperologists turned it down, was that even though she was probably right, she started from a conclusion and then looked for evidence for the conclusion. Rather than starting with evidence and going, oh, well, it points to this guy. She's like, I think it's this guy. Let me find what backs it up. So you got to be real careful about that. The other thing, and this is the king kahuna, because if you can avoid it, you will be rock solid in everything, including discussions with your kids and your wife and everything else, is that when the validity of a point is being talked about, the phrase "you can't prove it's not" does not hold water. If I say, well, you can't prove your wife isn't having an affair, but seriously, come on, man, you got to do better than that. And so the onus of proof always rests, and this is the foundation of our entire legal system. It's why we have the phrase "innocent until proven guilty." Is the onus of proof is always on the person who is asserting something. And so in the words of Sam Harris, if I say frozen yogurt makes you invisible, you will believe me to the extent that I'm able to offer evidence.
Right.
So those are just two things to watch out for when making any argument. Okay. So we contemplate the question from that point of view, which is there enough patterned stuff going on that we go, man, the only thing that can explain this is if the house is alive. God, I want it to be.
Right.
Because it's nifty.
Right.
But to look at it another way. Okay, so that's the first thing. Second thing is, does the story, the general theme and story of Dark Shadows, just not work if you go, the house isn't alive?
Mm.
If you stumbled across the secret diary of Dan Curtis,
Right.
and it said, no effing way is this house alive, would Dark Shadows break? Imagine you got his secret diary and it said there's no effing way Barnabas is actually a vampire.
Right.
Dark Shadows would break.
Right.
Dark Shadows just stops working. No way is there life after death. It's like, as they say on Price is Right. It just doesn't work.
Right.
And then the other way to judge something like that is to imagine Dan Curtis had a diary and it said, yes, the house is alive. There's evidence for it in every episode. And if you don't get that, you haven't watched the show. You're a big dope. Get off of my lawn. Well, okay, that might be true for life after death, which is key to Dark Shadows.
Right.
But with certain other things, I don't know. So those are kind of the sniff tests that then separates something from, man, it would be cool if, and yes, I will die on this hill.
Right.
Before I started ranting and raving about this earlier tonight, I kind of thought the house was alive.
Right.
And here's the bummer of academia. I kind of accidentally convinced myself I don't think it is. I wish it were. It makes me hope that Mark Perry's Collinwood will be alive.
Right.
Will be a living entity and will have a voice. And because the value, all we do, I mean, all the day book is and all, I think a lot of what you do is what are the coolest things that connect all of this stuff? What's like, what are the fibers that make it worth talking about, rather than, I saw a show about a vampire, it sure was cool, well, let's talk about something else. Right? No, we have this thing that we love, and we want to find connections and meaning.
Yeah.
And it's there. But it's to respect Dark Shadows and to love Dark Shadows.
Yeah.
It means being true to her.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And because the only way we can really love the truths that we find about them is if those are hills that we can die on.
Yeah.
Now, questions like, is Collinwood alive, are vital, though, to ask, because that's where all of the other things come from. And I hope it's alive. God, I wish they had gone on to do a story about that. I mean, imagine they're having a seance and a totally different type of voice starts coming out. Who are you? Paging the Bible, I am.
Yeah.
It's just I am the guardian of forever. Because that's what Collinwood is, it's the guardian of forever in Star Trek.
Yeah. It would be an amazing thing, because you don't have to have the house say, I'm the house. Like you said, it could just see, I am. Like,
Yeah.
and it would be really cool, as fans. But, like you said, I don't want anyone to think what we're saying here is fact. We're just having fun.
But it's like when we wrote this Child of Dark Shadows thing for the day book,
right.
or for Wallace's website, and someone at the 50th anniversary convention, oh no, it wasn't there, we were quoting it at the 50th anniversary convention, somebody wrote into the website saying that this this impugned the credibility
What?
of your website. And it's like, pal, we're a fan site for a soap opera that went off the air 45 years ago. Baby, if you're looking for us for credibility instead of like Johns Hopkins or something like that, maybe you need to go to a few more websites. It's like, yes, this is all because then, Joel, the thing that we have to come back to is that
Right.
it's all made up.
Right.
For a while, I got really, really, really just horribly, just constantly flamed by this one fan. I won't mention the last name, but I will say the first name was literally Karen.
Right.
And the behavior was totally Karen-esque. Now, there is another Karen who's a big fan, and she's wonderful.
Yeah.
And so the whole Karen slur thing is nonsense. And if that Karen is watching, I just think you're terrific. But this Karen, not so much. And she was going after me about that's not how vampires work. And Wallace finally stepped in and he said, you know these things don't exist, right? There's no how this works or how this does. It's all made up. So on that level, especially if, and here's like the ultimate weird layer. You own your experience with the show.
Yeah.
Your private experience with the show is completely yours.
Yeah.
And if that house being alive is something that you just feel, it's kind of in between the flicker of the frames, and if it just makes Dark Shadows even more romantic, it's kind of like how the Enterprise is, Kirk's Enterprise is kind of alive.
Right.
You know, you just have that feeling and it feels right. Then you are getting something even richer from the show, and that's a gift. And it's the gift of where your imagination and the show meet.
Right.
And so, hell yeah, that house is alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Patrick, buddy, it has been fun. I appreciate you coming on this night. I'll see you tomorrow night.
This was really good. Thanks for letting me flap my gums.
For our next episode, it will be 1841 Parallel Time. Link to where you can get the Dark Shadows Day book on Bounds definitely going to be in the description box. Patrick, buddy, you have a great night.